Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hello, thank you for joining me today. My name is Job. If you have any questions at any point in time, please feel free to jump in. You can use the chat if you prefer, or please feel free to turn on voice or video whenever you wish. Let me go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so you should be able to see that presentation taking up the full screen. Please let me know if that is not the case. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to talk to you today about how to build a timeline. Now, this program is aimed at two different audiences. If you are a writer writing memoir, you can timeline your life as a way to chart out how you'd like to plot your book. Or if you're writing fiction, you could make a timeline for the fictional events of your book. And also, similar to memoir writers, genealogists might find a lot of value in creating a timeline of your life in order to have that record for future generations. So how do we make a timeline? Let me show you. It's pretty easy. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is brainstorm your personal past. You're going to try and think of everything you can that has happened to you in your life. And brainstorming with yourself, and then also again with friends or family, trusted loved ones, they might think of things that you forgot about. So that can be helpful as well. But basically, you want to come up with everything you can think of, from illnesses and injuries to awards, projects, births and deaths of close friends and family, schools you attended, moves that you made, jobs that you've had, cars that you've owned, homes where you've lived, places you've traveled, losses you've suffered, relationships beginning and ending. And then once you have brainstormed your general basis for your timeline, you want to add in all of the dates that you can think of for these memories, whether it's something specific, like a specific day, specific time, or even if it's just the year, or, you know, the year with the question mark. Double check with someone else if you've got a friend or family member to help fill in the blanks. So after you've brainstormed your personal life events, you're going to want to think of regional and national events that have occurred, things that happen in the world that affect lots of people. So one of the things that my mom said everybody of her generation remembered was, where were you when JFK was shot? And I would say for my generation, one of those things would definitely be, where were you when 9/11 happened? And everybody has that personal story of, this happened to so many of us, and we all interacted with it in different ways, and we all have a different story to tell where that's concerned. So major events might include things like presidential elections, major storms, tornadoes, national disasters, things like that. Hurricane Katrina, of course, is a big one, somewhat recently. And then you want to add in those details. So everybody has a story, but what makes yours unique is that it is your personal story. So the way that you can personalize it is to share those details of what it meant to you specifically. So if you just want to start writing stuff down on scratch paper, you're going to brainstorm your past personal events and your past big events that affected many people. And then you're going to add in the dates and add in the details. And it's as simple as that. So once you've got the information generated, then you can go back and put things in order in order of date. And that's really all there is to it. So let me show you a couple. Okay, so this is just a little bit more detail on how to do that. So if you are using a physical piece of paper, you can draw a line across that page. You can number your page from the year that you were born to the present day, present year, and just start filling in important memories as they come to mind. So which memories make you smile with nostalgia or affection? Which make you shake your head or cringe in embarrassment? Which still give you pangs of regret or pain? Which events do you think changed you the most? Which helped you grow? Which did you see in a different light then than you do now? So what did you remember? Maybe does anybody want to share a milestone from their personal history? And if not, that's okay. I'm trying to see if I have the chat pulled up in a way that it'll let me see it. Okay, nothing's popping up on my screen, so I'm going to assume no one's talking. Okay. Well, I'm going to be sharing a bunch of personal timeline stuff in a minute. So basically, you're going to fill in your timeline with all of that key information for all of those key events. You're going to filter through your gathered information, highlighting what you want to include in the final draft. And these memories can be your fondest, your funniest, your most uplifting, or alternately, they could be your most difficult, your most challenging, your most upsetting. There are lots of ways to tell your story. So if you don't want to do your whole life all at once, let's say you've lived a long and eventful life, you could choose a starting point and an ending point for that section of your life. You know, maybe when I was married to my first partner from this date to this date, and that's a big chunk of my life, for example. Or you could choose, say, a section of decades, for example. So then if you can remember exact dates, that's great, but if not, just getting things in rough order is still really useful. Okay, so this is a really, really simple example. I made a timeline on Microsoft Paint. So I started with 1982 was the year that I was born, and I marked the decades 80, 90, 2000, 2010, 2020. So I have added, let's see, I used some color coding to try and keep things a little bit organized. So my siblings, I put in orange. My sister was born, my brother Gabriel was born, and my baby sister Libby was born. And then you can see in yellow, I wrote in different romantic partners that I have had over the years. In green, I added some life events that occurred to me as I was making this. Of course, the pandemic is going to be huge for everybody. We've all experienced it, but we've all experienced it in slightly different ways. Let's see. Some of the things that I remember from when I was in high school was the O.J. Simpson trial, that slow motion chase on the highway. And when Princess Diana died, my grandmother said, you know, this is a really big deal. This is something that's going to affect a lot of people. And major life events for me personally, when my parents got divorced, when I got a college degree, when I got married and became a mom, just different things like that. So this is just a very simple example, and I'm going to show you another way to do this if you prefer a little more organization to your presentation. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing. If anybody wants to say anything while I can see all of my screen, please feel free to do so. Got the chat pulled up so I know that I can view it. All right, so I'm going to close out that presentation and pull up the other one. Okay, and I'm just getting this other presentation pulled up here. I will show you that in just a moment. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And this is a timeline, a much more complex timeline, but also much more organized timeline that I created in Microsoft Excel. So as you can see, I used the tabs to create different categories. And the very first category I used was year. So I was able to start at the, well, okay, if we start at the top, I started with the very first this year. I started with today's date this year. And then I counted downward and backward until I reached my birth year, which was 1982. So now I have a scroll from the year I was born to the present day. And you're going to see how that is useful as we go on. Welcome to those of you who are just joining us, and I am recording the session, so the full program will be available afterwards. Okay, so once I created the year timeline, it's easier for me to be able to see the age next to the year, because I don't immediately translate, okay, that year meant that I was that age. So it's helpful for me to have both, and it may be the case for you as well, where you can have your age next to the year so that you know quickly and easily at what age, at what year. So then the next thing I added in was moves and family information. So I moved around a lot as a kid. My dad was a carpenter, and we went where the work was. So we started out in California. And then 4 years after me, my sister Sienna was born. And 4 years after her, our brother Gabe was born. And you can see this red line here. I just created these lines so I would see where the decade breaks were. So 1980, 1990, 2000, and so on. Okay, and then we moved from California to Hawaii. And we moved from Hawaii to Missouri, and my parents were separated, and then they got divorced. My mom got remarried, and we had our baby sister, Libby, and I moved from Missouri to Illinois to go to college. And during that time, I was able to study abroad in Japan, which was very exciting. After college, I moved back to Missouri. And then I got involved with a boyfriend who wanted to go to New Mexico, where his family was, and then Colorado, where his family moved. So you can see it's getting a little convoluted here, but I wanted to document each of these things in the year that they occurred so that I would have a clear idea of what happened and when. So after things didn't work out with that boyfriend, I went from Colorado back home to Missouri, where my family lives. Then more recently, I moved to Arkansas, again, following Lev, and I became a stepmom, and I got married, I purchased our first home, and then I just wrote in all this information that I just keep in my little notebook about what we've done to the house. Because I don't know about you guys, but it feels like owning a home, there's never ending repairs and never ending updates that need to occur. So I just put it all in. And you can put whatever information you prefer. You can put whatever you feel is important, leave out what you don't. It's totally up to you what you'd like to include. So after moves and family information, I added a tab for school. And you don't have to do it like this, but you can if you like the way this visually is laid out. I used 2 columns for school to show that we are 2 different ages in each grade that we attend. So in kindergarten, we go from age 5 to age 6, or most of us, right? And so then as I moved forward, I showed that each year kind of crisscrosses. So you're going through these different ages. And I graduated from high school and started immediately in undergrad. And then I graduated and I showed the year that I was studying abroad. That was during my junior year. And then it's blank for a long time. And then I decided I wanted to go back to school for my master's for creative writing. And then I was able to do that at UCA. It was a great program. So I was very happy that I did that. And that is everything for school. So then romantic partners again, but this one is way more organized and way easier to tell like what's going on and where, how. And I didn't put every person I've ever dated. I just put a couple of more important ones. But basically like, okay, my very first boyfriend ever. And then major relationships that I was in high school, in college, and then as an adult. So, and then I added a category for work. I'm very happy and pleased to be a CALS employee. I absolutely adore it here. I know that's really nerdy. I'm not just kissing up. I love working for the library. I know I'm a total dork. Sorry, guys. But I wanted to go back and catalog. I haven't had very many jobs. Some people have like a ton of different jobs, and maybe your chart for that would be more complicated. But I've only had a handful of jobs, so I thought it'd be pretty straightforward to categorize those. So the summer after sophomore year, I started my very first job at the grocery store, working at Price Chopper. And likewise, I was a cashier at Osco Drug and Casey's General Store. And then I had different on-campus jobs while I was in school. In Japan, I was able to do some tutoring. It's the different on-campus jobs. And then during breaks, I was able to go home and keep the original jobs that I had. So I was able to go back and forth. And then I had a couple of temp agency things. And then I started CALS. So I moved here in 2009 and I started at CALS in 2009 part-time. And then I was able to go to full-time the following year. And I've been with CALS ever since. And I had the wonderful opportunity to start offering programs like this one. So I was very excited to get to start doing that. And that's that. Okay, so then this next tab, all I'm doing is visually squeezing all of the columns together so that there's more room. So none of the information has changed. I'm basically just squishing it. So what I wanted to do was add in a little bit more extra information. And these are just ideas. Your life is going to be different than mine, and you're going to have different categories that are important to you. But I thought I would show you some possibilities. So certainly today, there are kids who have been born and raised on the internet their entire lives, you know, from the birth picture to the high school graduation, you know, their entire lives have been online. Well, I'm a little bit older than that, so my web presence didn't start until see, 2009, I made a Facebook page, and actually probably a little before that I had like MySpace. Um, but I maintained a Facebook page. And at some point, let's see, in 2014, when I was 32, see how easy that is? I started keeping a blog. And I thought, okay, I'm going to run this blog for a while and see how I like it and see how it goes. So you can see really easily as I scroll slowly here that I kept a blog for several years, and I improved my writing chops doing that. So that was good. And at some point, I decided that I would like to have a paid website. So I went ahead and did that, and I've had that ever since. So another thing that I'm really passionate about is this thing called NaNoWriMo. It stands for National Novel Writing Month, and it is a writing activity that a lot of people participate in. And during the month of November, you write a book from beginning to end. You write 50,000 words in 30 days. And I know it sounds insane, but it's a lot of fun to try whether you succeed or not. And it actually is possible to succeed. The main lesson there is when you focus on quantity rather than quality, you kind of prove to yourself how much you're capable of doing. So I started participating in NaNoWriMo in 2011. That was my first year. And that was the year before I started my master's school program. So I was actually able to use some of the material I produced during that November to go back and revise and revise and revise and create material for my application to the writing program at UCA. So that was really useful and helpful to me. So then for several years, I was a participant in NaNoWriMo, and I still am. But at some point, I decided that I would like to be involved more. And there's a position called Municipal Liaison, and that's just sort of the person in charge of an area, a geographic area on the map. So the very first year that the previous municipal liaison stepped down, we didn't understand the changing process exactly, so we missed the deadline. So we didn't have an official municipal liaison that year, but I ran the events, and then from the next year forward, I was able to officially be the ML for the region. And I'm just going to show maybe a couple more categories here, just for fun. So in 2017, I heard about this thing called the Word of the Year. And basically the idea of a Word of the Year is that unlike a New Year's resolution, there is no way to fail a Word of the Year because it's a concept, it's an idea, it's your Northern Star that you keep in your mind and think, this is the kind of year that I want to have, this is the kind of vibe that I want to focus on, and it's just like a directional point to help you whenever you feel a little lost. You can come back to it and say, okay, this is where I started and this is where I would like to be headed. So in 2017, I picked my first Word of the Year. I picked the word habitual because it reminded me of habits and rituals, and I wanted to be more intentional in the time that I set for the things that I wanted to work on, become better at. So that was my very first one. And then from there, I picked get up and go, which is not a word, it's a phrase, but it's still okay. I got really into fitness for a little while. And so my following year was grind. So I was really doing the exercise thing and also coffee, grind, haha, get it. So then after that, I focused a little more toward the writing rather than the exercising. I picked the word realize because, like, one of the definitions of the word is to realize one's dreams rather than to just, oh, that's something that occurs or that's something that happens. It can be like the process of making your dreams come true, right? So I thought that was an inspiring word to pick. And then I picked step. So, okay, well, 2020 was when everything went a little crazy for everybody. And so that 2021 January, I thought, everything is so difficult right now. Everything is so crazy. And we don't know what's going on. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how things are going to go. And so I was feeling very limited and very small in my thinking. But I thought, okay, I can take a step, right? I can put one foot in front of the other. I can focus on one step at a time and I can move forward in this way. And so that was my word of the year for 2021. And following that, I felt like, okay, now I've got some momentum. I can keep moving forward. So then I picked stride. And then this year I picked the word reach. And so I thought it was pretty interesting how reach can be the verb where you are attempting to grasp something, but it can also be the word that means that you have reached that destination, reached that goal. So I liked the duality of that word. And then, okay, so then I started doing the world events. There's this really easy to use part of Wikipedia. If you go to https://en for English .wikipedia.org/wiki/ and then put in the year you were born _in_the_United_States. So basically you can go to any year, and if you want to go through each year, you would just keep changing that one number, 1982, 1983, and the rest of the web address stays the same. And you can click through and see major events that took place each year that you were alive. And so being able to view this on Wikipedia, it reminded me of things that I had forgotten, right? Or I learned things that I didn't quite realize, Adobe, which is the program that everyone uses to open a PDF, was founded the year that I was born. So that, like, little interesting details, right? And I put in a lot of United States NASA type things because when I was young, I wanted to be an astronaut. So a lot of the space events that took place each year felt like a big deal to me as a child. So you can see in red, I've added some personal stories. For example, in '83, they started the Disney Channel, and we were always too poor to have the Disney Channel. But whenever they would do like a promotional event or something, we'd sign up for like the trial period. Or, if we got to go to somebody's house who had the Disney Channel, we would watch it and it would be really fun and exciting. And so those are just sort of like those little personal details that make it mean more when you're connecting to these larger events that affected lots of people. But again, you have your own personal story about how it affected you. So science fiction was a huge part of my upbringing, and science and science fiction were very important to me. And so I didn't even realize that Return of the Jedi had been released in '83. I was thinking they were all from the 70s, whenever that was, right? But I thought it was pretty interesting that the last of the original Star Wars movies was released after I was born. And I watched those movies over and over and over, as I'm sure some of us did. Christmas Story is another classic movie that many of us came to watch over and over as it was shown on whatever channel each year for Christmas. Cabbage Patch dolls were huge when I was a kid. And my mom got me one and I named her Renee. And um, yeah, she couldn't find a white doll, so she got me a black doll and it was no big deal. Like that's how simple it is. So um yeah, just really silly little things like Born in the USA. It was like the first album I ever owned, like cassette tape. I thought it was a pretty big deal when I was little. So let's see. Okay, in 85, Nintendo was released to the US, and my brothers and sisters and I, sorry, brother and sister, and I would play on this little itty bitty TV screen that was black and white and about 6 inches big. We would play that little Mario Brothers game, the original Mario Brothers game. And that was back when Blockbuster would rent the gaming system, not just movies, but also the system to play the games on, because people didn't even have those yet, or some people did and some people didn't. So in 85, they did a 20-year celebration of the Barbie Miss Astronaut. And so they re-released it and made a new outfit for her. And that was one of the ones that I had, the Barbie, the Space Barbie. Let's see. I just put in little details about things that were happening that people might remember. I didn't know a lot about the Philippines growing up. I still don't know a ton, but I am a quarter Filipino. My mom's mom came from the Philippines during World War II. That's how her parents met. And so I learned that not only did the Philippines have the first female president, but that she had a gigantic shoe collection. And that's what I knew about her. So again, just one of those silly little stories that, like, that tiny detail, that's what I got told. I added in a lot of popular culture, like movie references, like Princess Bride was like a big deal for me and my friends, and I'm sure as it was for many people. And I also added in a lot of LGBTQ stuff because that's kind of one of my big soapboxes. And so that's really significant to me. So things like the first National Coming Out Day being celebrated, and the second March on Washington for equal rights, those kinds of things. So just these little connections. But for example, Dell was incorporated in 88, and much later as an adult, as a young adult, I would get my very first Dell computer. So, for example, in 1989, my sister and I were obsessed with The Little Mermaid. This was one of our very favorite movies. We went and saw it in the theater, and it corresponded with one of our birthdays close enough that we had a themed birthday party. And then basically we would just go home from school and watch it every single day on VHS. So back when that was a thing. So yeah, I probably still have most of it memorized. And now, present day America, it's come full circle, and we have a new Little Mermaid and a new generation of little girls who can be excited about mermaids and heroes that they can see themselves in. So it's pretty neat. Yeah. So TV shows that have gone on forever and ever, like Seinfeld and The Simpsons. I was not allowed to watch The Simpsons. My parents were very strict, but it's basically been airing my entire life, it feels like. Let's see. So there was a TV show on Nickelodeon called The Adventures of Pete and Pete. I don't know why. There were two brothers and they were both named Pete. They looked very different from each other. But anyway, I remember loving the show. I named one of my cats Pete. It was the whole thing. But there was a girl in it who worked at a photo booth, right? So not only is this television program something I remember from my past and I'm connected to in some personal way, but also that representation of the past and those things that have now disappeared, right? There's no such thing as a photo booth anymore. Nobody needs to go anywhere to develop their pictures because there is no developing pictures. I mean, unless you're like photographer and then you do your own thing. But for most of us, we just, have pictures on our phone, or we, send them into some service that'll then print them out and send them back to us, something like that. Yeah, so this is, I mean, all of these things can probably be better organized than I have them because I didn't really do categories. But essentially, I tried to do major life events, things that took place that affected lots of people, space stuff because I was really into space. Like I wasn't connected to sports at all. I didn't have a family who was super interested in sports, so I never got really into it. But the fact that Magic Johnson had HIV was a huge deal, like way outside of the sports community, right? So because of my connection to LGBTQ stuff, that felt like a really significant example of something that happened that affected a lot of people or that a lot of people knew about that was connected. And again, I said this before, but if anybody wants to say anything at any point in time, please feel free to jump in, interrupt me, drop something in the chat, however you feel most comfortable. But I mean, basically, I'm just showing you this that I created, and I would be happy to answer questions if you have any. Otherwise, I'm just going to talk about this until the end of the time. But I am recording it again, so if you missed the beginning, it will be available online. So just keep a lookout for that. And I will try and keep my chat box visible in case anybody wants to ask anything. So 92, I was 10 years old. The book series Goosebumps was extremely popular. Again, I was not allowed to read these books. My parents were really strict, but I always remember them being very popular. Batman, the animated series, was a really big deal for my brother and I. We really bonded over this. Even though we were 8 years apart, we both loved Batman, so we had that in common. So Hurricane Iniki hit the Hawaiian Islands in 92, including the islands of Kauai and Oahu. We ended up moving to Kauai 2 years later. My biological father was a carpenter, and we, like I said before, we went where the work was. So that was one of the moves that took place in my life as a kid. So I was able to experience a little bit of living in Hawaii and kind of seeing firsthand how hurricanes can affect people. And it was pretty crazy. There were street signs that just didn't exist anymore. So. Animaniacs, out of Warner Brothers, water tower that had the 3 little Animaniac siblings. And it was a piggy bank. So you just think of these little tiny details and they just pop up in your head. Power Rangers was huge for my brother. It was not huge for me, but it was huge for my brother. Bill Clinton became the 42nd president, and I had no idea when I was 11 that I would someday move to Arkansas, where Bill Clinton was from. So things just kind of come back around. The low speed chase of O.J. Simpson with the white Bronco. Let's see. Microsoft Windows 95. Yahoo's Incorporated. Forrest Gump won 6 of 13 Academy Awards. Major crimes, major theater events. Again, like I said, sports wasn't a big deal to my family, but Tiger Woods as a Black man playing professional golf was a huge deal. It was like, okay, now we're finally getting somewhere. So that was something that, regardless of it being sports, was like, all right, that's significant. That's part of our history, right? Let's see. I'm sure you all remember like the million years that the death of JonBenet Ramsey, the 6-year-old beauty queen, was all over every magazine and pulp mag forever. Like you can probably still find them. But that was like a huge story, starting when I was 14 and carrying into many, many years into the future. Just scrolling through here, my baby sister, Libby, was obsessed with Teletubbies. That was the show for her. Let's see. Matrix movie, the Columbine High School Massacre. That was sort of the first one that garnered attention on a big level, that everybody heard about it, everybody knew what had happened, everybody was affected by it in some way. I know I had friends who liked to wear black coats, and it was no longer okay to do that because it was associated with this awful thing that had occurred. Let's see. And I mentioned a little earlier, September 11th. Moving how many years into the future now? 22 years later, we know the effect that it had and the changes that it wrought and what did or didn't take place since. But at that point in time, when it was happening, it felt like the end of the world. It felt like everything was going to change forever. It felt like if people can attack Americans on American soil, what does that mean? Wars are always far away, fought somewhere else, and suddenly the reality of the possibility of that happening to us in our country just felt mind-blowing, right? So yeah, it was really big, and it affected a lot of people. If you didn't lose someone, you knew someone who had, or if you weren't there, you knew someone who was there. Just, it was big, it was far reaching. Different court cases, different movies and TV shows, death of celebrities. I mentioned a little earlier that when I was young, I wanted to be an astronaut. I had that in my head probably until mid to late high school. And I realized that the best way to pursue becoming an astronaut was probably to join the military and become a pilot. And I didn't really feel like doing that. So I decided I would write science fiction instead. So that was kind of the turning point for me. Let's see. 2005, the social news site Reddit launches. I'm not huge into Reddit, but we all have heard of it, right? So just one of those things that feels like it's been around forever. Well, actually, it's been around since 2005. Smoking being banned in public places, in restaurants and areas. I'm old enough to remember when smoking was happening in restaurants, not on airplanes, but in restaurants, and it was not awesome. So we've moved pretty far from that now. And of course, you all know the more recent things that have taken place. And I'm sure we all have personal stories about so many different things that we're connected to. But basically, I just wanted to show you a glimpse into how easy it is to create a timeline, whether you're a genealogist who is putting things down on paper for future generations, or if you're going to be writing a memoir. There are lots of ways to brainstorm and think of those big things and little things that happened in your life. And I hope you enjoyed today's presentation. I'm deeply appreciative for you being here today. And thanks again for Cal's making this possible. So thank you.